Hey guys, it's Jake, and every guitar tone that you heard in this song was made with this $40 Boss DS-1 distortion pedal. Let's take a look at my Logic session and I'll show you everything that I did to the guitar tones to get the tone in this video. Alright, so let's take a look at my Logic session and see what we've got going on. So I have the guitar track soloed right now. I'm going to solo just one of them and center it just so that we can kind of hear what we're doing. So as far as tracking goes, it's just two double track guitars, a bass, and then drums, and then there's a sub at the beginning, just because why not? But otherwise, it's a very simple recording setup. So let me disable everything I have on my guitar chain, and we'll hear what it sounds like just going straight into the interface. Alright, so that is the sound of just the Boss DS-1 with my Jackson Juggernaut going into it. One thing to note is that I am boosting it with a Horizon Devices Precision Drive, not adding any gain, just using it to cut the low end. One thing that you'll notice about this is that I'm treating the DS-1 almost like a preamp or a guitar amplifier, and how I'm treating the signal. So, like any other amp, I would probably be boosting that, unless it's a very specific kind of amp, I would be boosting it. And, yeah, so then let's go into what's happening next. So next I have it running into some EQ before it hits the cab, and that's just doing a little bit to the signal to make it a little bit more aggressive and modern sounding. I can show you that in just a minute. Then below that, I'm running a session of studio cabs by Get Good Drums. I'm not using any of the stock cabinets. I'm using a Lancaster Audio Mesa rectifier cab. And just kind of using Zilla as an IR loader. So turn this on, and this is what it sounds like with the cab impulse turned on. Alright, so with that, if you don't know what an IR is, it is essentially a complex EQ that simulates what a sound would sound like if it was being run through something. There's things like that for reverb, so you'll have reverb IRs. In this case, we're using a cabinet IR to simulate what a guitar signal would sound like being run through, in this case, a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier 4x12 captured with a microphone. I'm not sure which one they're using, but yeah, that's what we're doing. So it basically takes that sound and makes it sound like it's being run through a mic'd up cab, which is why it sounds a lot more usable. So then I have a noise gate, which is just kind of cutting the hiss, which helps with some of the choppier riffs. And then back to the EQ, let's take a look here. So this is it without. And then this is it with. And what I'm doing here is I have a low pass just kind of taking care of some of the high-end fizziness, a high pass taking care of some of those subby lows so it doesn't clash with the bass. I'm boosting around 200 just to give the guitars a little bit more body, cutting in the middle just because it sounds more aggressive that way. I'm boosting around 4K. What that does, it really emphasizes the pick attack and just kind of gives it a more aggressive sound. And then I'm boosting the top end just a hair just to give it a more just grindy, aggressive sound. And I'm cutting out at around 2200 hertz just to get rid of some of those nasally high mids. And yeah, I just think it makes the guitar tone sound a lot better. Again, I would be doing this with almost any amp. The EQ changes would vary from amp to amp, but I usually do put an EQ between my cab and my amp just to tweak the amp tone a little bit more in depth than a normal EQ section. If you've ever seen someone put a graphic EQ in the effects loop of an amp, it's basically doing that. Alright, so then let's go over to my guitar bus. I'll just disable everything in there. So on my bus, I have a Mag EQ by Plug-in Alliance, and this is a pretty straightforward EQ. I really enjoy how this sounds on basically everything. I use it on drums, my master bus, on just about everything, just because it sounds great and can really just bring everything to life. So what I'm doing is I'm boosting the airband at around 5K and up, cutting a little bit of the 2.5K, doing a little bit of a scoop at 650, doing another bump at 160, and then the subs and 40 I'm just kind of leaving alone. I'm basically just doing what I did between the DS-1 and the cab, but I'm doing it after the fact just to make it just a bit more aggressive after the fact. So this is it without, and this is it with. So yeah, just it sounds a lot better that way, in my opinion, just more aggressive and more finished sounding, and it just kind of, I don't know, it just sounds really good. And then another channel EQ afterwards. This is just a high pass and a low pass filter, just to make sure the guitars are sitting where they're supposed to in a mix. This is it without. And then I have a compressor running at the end of the loop, which just kind of clamps down on the palm mutes and any parts that are louder than others. It's a pretty subtle effect, so this is it without. So there's a little bit of a bump in volume there, and that's just because it's a compressor and I didn't really level match it. I just kind of did that after the fact. I like my compressors to be fairly transparent on guitar just because I don't want them to change the distortion quality or anything. I just want them to clamp down on frequencies that are louder than others and just kind of make the entire thing nice and level like a compressor does. And other than that, that's what I'm doing with these guitars. Another thing to note is that a good guitar tone will only get you so far. So much of just big, aggressive sounding guitar tone is the bass. The bass, I'd say, having a good bass tone, I'd say is probably more important than having a good guitar tone. Because you can have like a kind of shot sounding guitar, but if the bass tone's super sick, then it'll make the entire mix sound a lot better. So again, this is what the bass sounds like. It's kind of scooped, pretty grindy. I went with a more like extreme setting than I would normally use. But yeah, that's how I mixed the guitar tone coming from a Boss DS-1. So altogether that mix sounds like this. Alright, and I think it turned out pretty good. Alright, so there you guys have it. That's how I got a pretty decent metal tone out of this Boss DS-1. I know it's been kind of a meme on the internet for a while with the Boss Metal Zone and how it's the worst pedal of all time, but there have been tons of videos of people getting usable to really good sounds out of a Boss Metal Zone, so I figured I would take it a step further and try the entry-level beginner distortion pedal to end all beginner distortion pedals. A lot of people will immediately tell you, oh, the Boss DS-1, it sucks, it's terrible, it sounds like garbage. But I honestly don't think it sounds that bad. I think it's more about how people use it. You can put a super expensive Friedman BE Overdrive Deluxe in front of, you know, a Fender Trampion 15 watt, and it's going to sound like garbage because those amps aren't made to handle that kind of distortion or those frequencies. And I think that's the same thing with this. I think that it's more of a problem with the amps people are pairing them with than the distortion pedals themselves, because if you pair this with a decent sounding cab and a little bit of EQ, it sounds pretty good. So obviously, if I did the same process with something like a Friedman Overdrive or an Apex preamp or something more boutique and expensive, I probably would have gotten a better tone. This was more of an experiment for myself to see if I could get a decent sounding tone out of this, but also to kind of show it's less about the gear that you have and more about knowing what to do with it. Because you can get a really bad sound out of this, or you can get a good sound out of it if you know what you're doing. So I'd encourage you guys, if you have a cheap distortion pedal or, you know, a piece of gear that you think sounds awful and you can't do anything with, I'd encourage you guys to pick those up and try and make some cool sounds so that you might make a guitar tone that's really unique and that you can't really replicate without that piece of gear. Alright, that's it for me, guys. If you like any of the music that you heard, I'll leave a link to my band down in the description below. And until next time, guys, have a good one.